Hi, my name is John Anthony. Yeah, sincerely thank you everybody for coming to the talk. It's going to be about dependency management. 1.0 to Workspaces. Little stuff about me. Start with a slide. I'm not going to read it all out. Been developing for a long time. A lot of open source stuff. Love to get back. And using Go for a long time as well. Like 1.0. I still get messages from people telling me that my code is still in production from around that kind of time and ask me questions about it. I'm a real practical Go user, so this is kind of going to be about the real stuff that I've seen. I made my first contribution to Go this year, and it was around Workspaces, so kind of related to this stuff. I want to do a lot more. We have a booth at the con. I'm going to mention that multiple times throughout the talk. Come and see us. We got free toy cars. We're fun to talk to, and if you want to skip like 2 steps and go straight to being friends, drop any of these things. We can talk about any of that stuff. Or if you're like interested in stuff and you want to tell me all about it, yeah, I love learning about stuff people love. So go ahead and do it. Company I work for, Human. I've given a one-line summary. We do smart things with fleet insurance. We'll talk to you for ages about the smart stuff we do with fleet insurance if you want to hear it. So come on over to the booth. That's the best place to do it. There's a whole swarm of us there who will not just tell you about it, but will be able to talk to you about the things that you find interesting about whatever it is we're doing. Standard disclaimer. My company's obviously been really cool and allowed me to come along and do this talk and give me extra time to do it. If I make any mistakes, like I try my best every day to be a good person. I do make mistakes, so yeah, like let me know. Mistakes are on me. We're a sponsor of the con, which is really cool. And doing slightly out of order, but my colleagues, I've run through this a couple of times. It's actually the first time doing this talk. I've run through it a couple of times with my colleagues who have contributed a lot of stuff, a lot of feedback. They've kind of helped me get it all together, so it's not just my work. I want to give a shout out as well to my friend and colleague, Robbie King, who is doing a talk tomorrow morning. It's going to be like this, but way more professional. And I'm going to mention that booth one more time, and I'm going to mention that we're hiring, and I'm going to mention that again too. So the purpose of the talk, a whole bunch of stuff. It's specifically about how external packages are managed in Go. Kind of want to be useful for everybody. There's a couple of things in here where I've tried to go and pick up some weird stuff that I think even people who have been using Go for a long time and know all this stuff already, I hope you'll pick up something from a keyword. Maybe I'll ask at the end, like, hey, anybody here learn absolutely nothing? We'll get a show of hands. We'll see how that goes. It's going to cover the 10 years ago. It's going to cover the context, only really when it's relevant to Go from other languages, other ecosystems. There's going to be some drama in there, so look forward to that. And of course, like I've seen a lot of this stuff from a personal viewpoint, but I've tried my best to approach it from an academic viewpoint to try and make it valuable in that way. The slides, the last slide is going to have a bunch of contact information on it. It's going to also have a link to this talk. There's a bunch of stuff in here where I reference articles and papers. Like, go and read those. If you see them, the name, if you Google the name, you'll almost certainly find it, but like links available. Lots and lots of this information, but it's not really, I've never really seen it all together told as like a story, as like a history. I want to do this talk again in the future, so if you have any comments or feedback, there will be QA at the end. Kind of want to give preference to people who are asking questions, but even if you just want to like have a chat and you want to bring something up, feel free at the end. Yeah, corrections help me make it better. And of course, yeah, contact information. When I started putting this talk together, I realized the word dependency is so overloaded in software development that it can mean a whole bunch of other different things. So this talk is not about these specific things. It's not going to be a full history. Dependency management goes way back before the beginning of Go. There's a lot of computer science articles about it. It's really interesting. I'm not going to cover all of it. The only thing I'll really cover is the stuff that's kind of relevant to the lead up to the release of Go. It's not about dependency injection. The development style of inverting your dependencies, it's not that. Somebody asked me very early on about some dynamic dependency stuff. It's not about runtime dependencies or static analysis. Static and dynamic linking. And it's not going to be like all the C-Go stuff about making sure you copy shared object files around, things like that. I'm not going to preach to everybody and try and change how you work, unless you're not using modules, in which case you should definitely change how you work and use modules. Unless you've got like a legacy code base that you can't update. It's not just about modules though, even though they're a big part of the Go ecosystem now and the kind of correct way to handle those dependencies. And despite the fact that it's really interesting and cool, it's not going to be about graphs and topological sorting and all the kind of fun computer science stuff about how dependencies are actually kind of resolved in a recursive way. So I've got a timeline. Tell them what you're going to tell them, style. We're going to follow time as it flows in the reference universe that we all currently inhabit, and start at the beginning, and then we're going to follow the passage of time forwards and finish at the end. ISO 8601, almost certainly. I didn't check that, but I think it's in there. So quick demographics. It would kind of help me, like, it can kind of change the talk a little bit to the audience. It would help me to know a little bit about kind of what level of experience people are at, or what pieces of this, what I'm going to touch, people have actually used already. So if you guys wouldn't mind, could I see a show of hands for people who have not really done much with Go? Like, it's okay if you've done like toy projects and a bit of learning, but otherwise not much. Yeah, a couple of people, right? A handful of people. How about people who have only worked with Go with modules specifically? Kind of the newer way of working with it. Yeah, handful of people. How about people who have only used Go without modules and never touched the kind of newer modules way of working? Nobody. That's fantastic to see. And then people who have used both, used modules and used without. Excellent. A more experienced crowd than I thought I was going to see. Cool. So pre 1.0, I'm not going to recount the famous history about how Go came about, but I'm going to reference this document in as much as it does kind of summarize how dependencies were integral to the initial ideas of what Go would be and why. So in this language design document, 2 sections that are really, really relevant. Go and check it out. I actually kind of read it properly. Yeah, the dependencies they were handled in C and C++ and why they were kind of inefficient. Header files, having to go over them tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of times for a sizable code base. And then how dependencies are handled as a contrast in Go, especially around making sure that each dependency only has to be read once, and the kind of design decision to only, to not handle circular dependencies. I'm sure anybody who's written a reasonable amount of Go has been told at some point, you've got a circular dependency, fix it, and you've refactored your code, made your code better, and then that's gone away. And also the design decision to make remote dependencies, or external dependencies, decentralized, use the URL as the import statement. All the stuff that goes into that, and of course the quote, which I think is really telling about how important dependency management is in Go. This approach to dependency management is the single biggest reason why Go compilations are faster than C or C++ compilations. Fantastic, right? So we can touch on Go 1 and the Go 1 compatibility promise. The idea that the code you write is still valid, even if you wrote it all the way back on 1.0. You might even be following pretty good modern standards, though those best practices may have changed. It's not like super, super related to dependency management, but it's worth mentioning that the compatibility promise doesn't cover the tooling. It's been generally stable, but as an example, GoGet, I've given an example here of how GoGet has been deprecated, and its behavior has changed over the years. It's, I think, probably the most famous example of like breaking tooling. So a period that I'll refer to as the Dark Ages, 1.0 to 1.10. Again, link here about the best way to work in this style, even just as a kind of a reference piece, something to go back and kind of study. The idea basically being to use a GOPATH that points to where your workspace is going to be, and then with your GOPATH, you download your dependencies, and they're going to populate a structure that looks something like this. where you have a bin folder that contains your binaries, and then the most important part, the core part, source folder, contains all the URLs broken down at their forward slashes into a bunch of paths, so that your dependencies are actually all within that workspace. It's got a bunch of obvious problems. If you are jumping around to different projects, you've kind of got a choice. You can either work with multiple workspaces and change your GOPATH all the time, or you can use one big workspace and have all your projects in there. It has the kind of downside that you won't necessarily be able to differentiate between the dependencies for all your different projects. You can get a bit tangled up, a bit lost in there. So nobody else is really doing dependencies that way. People would have the same problems. If you go back and look at Stack Overflow at that time, people asking the same stuff over and over and over. How do I work with this? I'm getting a GOPATH error. What do I need to do? This is definitely a quote that somebody said at some point, but I have no reference. It should just work like NPM. NPM is perfect, and the next slide definitely isn't going to ruin that. And of course, we get to drama. And actually, when I ran a couple of people through this, I was surprised by how many people had not heard of the left pad drama. I just assumed that it was a massive thing that everybody knew about. It would kind of help me get a show of hands of anybody who is aware of the left pad unpublished drama. Like half. Okay, yeah, that's kind of what I found. I thought it was going to be really high. So yeah, what a headline, right? Around 2016, this is the thing that's happening. Loads of stuff broke for drama reasons. Lawyers are mentioned. I went to go and draw a diagram to explain this and found that XKCD, of course, had done it already. I think there's a fantastic explanation of the issue as it was there. Soak it all up, it's glorious. So in relation to this, in this kind of context of how the kind of landscape was for dependencies at the time, a lot of people kind of dissatisfied with the workspace way of working, and this kind of issue being big news. We've got a couple of articles here from Russ Cox, who has written quite a lot on this subject. I think would be an understatement. 2 big articles, loads of stuff in mailing lists. Really good summaries. I highly recommend you go and read them if you get a chance. They cover not just the stuff that's happening here, but some other issues as well, which I will just touch on. And he's totally right. He's talking about it often in the context of Go specifically as well, which is really nice, but a lot of people are talking about this in a lot of different ways, still now as well. A deleted dependency isn't the only problem. Somebody maliciously altering the code in the dependency, publishing with a new version if the version isn't pinned, all that kind of stuff. And of course, it's not just magically solved in Go, but there's things you can do to kind of make it a bit better. Obviously, not using unnecessary dependencies and picking dependencies that don't have a lot of dependencies themselves. If anybody's used create racknap and then maybe put a UI toolkit on top of that and then had to install 2.5 million dependencies, you'll get it, right? So Go doesn't tend to work in that way. Fewer is better. Pick people you trust to be the people that you have as your dependencies, and pin your version, use checksums. This is all kind of like common stuff now. It was around back then, but wasn't necessarily used all the time. And using vendoring, which I'm going to touch on a little bit later, the act of just copying in all your dependencies so nobody can screw with them. So 2016, there's been a bit of a lead up to this, bunch of third-party tooling. Everybody's having a go at it. Big list of them here. I don't know if anybody's touched any of these, but lots of them. They are interesting. If you want to go and have a look, a bunch of them are all, they're focusing on different stuff. One's focused on basically just vendoring. How can I vendor this really, really well? Others are focused on convenience. Kind of cool. Don't use them. Don't use them. They're dead. They're gone. Right. So we're up to here. Through the dark ages, which basically brings us to, from here, it's the lead up to where we are now. So it's the kind of story from this mess, this chaos, through to officially managed modules. So there's dep. Show of hands, anybody use dep when it was about? Yeah, really recognizable. an official experiment to implement a package manager for Go. Just want to give a shout out, of course, people who put in all the hard work for this. But really noticeable, I think, that so many stars, but look how many forks it's got for how many stars. Everybody was taking this thing and hacking on it and just trying things out, doing things for themselves. It has a familiar layout, both compared to Go's modules now, but also compared to other package management kind of options, NPM, of course, being one, cargo, that kind of stuff. You've got a tumble file that is going to hold the information about all of your dependencies, a lock file that holds the checksums that allow you to tell that your packages haven't been tampered with, and then a vendor folder in case you want to vendor all that stuff. Same thing with the usage. Like, it's pretty close to where modules are now. You just run dep init to initialize your dependency management, and then dep ensure -add with the path of the dependency to include it in your list. Deprecated in 2020 in favor of modules, also referred to as first-class package versioning in the documentation. Again, link here to to a decent article on pretty much everything about them if you want to kind of dig in and do more. But yeah, vgo was the pre-release version, fork of Go 1.10, that allowed people to have a tinker with this before it became official. Initially released in 1.11 and then finalized in 1.13. Initially, there was a requirement to use the Go 1.11 module environment variable, which I'm sure a lot of people recognize. Need to be set on. It's now the default. You can actually disable its usage by setting it to off. I didn't know that before I started writing this talk. Don't. So the big thing about it, no more GOPATH, no more screwing around with these kind of these workspaces that are in a certain layout. You can see the visible influences here, I mentioned already, but you have the same files doing the same things, so the format has changed. GoPackage.toml becomes GoMod, GoPackage.lock becomes GoSum, and that vendor folder is still there. And the usage, very, very similar. You do an init, but this time you give the URL of your package, and then you do a go get when you want to add new dependencies to it. Sure, everybody's kind of seen these commands. I'm not going to belabor these too much. I do want to drop the go mod file in though, if only because there's a couple of keywords in there that I know a lot of people don't touch. This is my big gambit to hope that at least one of these keywords hasn't been seen by like people who know most of this stuff. So you know the module keyword gives the name of your module. The go keyword gives the minimum version of Go that you're expecting to use. Required to give you a list of requirements, and nowadays you'll normally see that split into two blocks. The first one being your direct dependencies, and then the second one being the indirect ones, transitive dependencies, I think some people would refer to them as. The replace keyword, let's see a show of hands, how many people have had to use a replace keyword in their Go mod? Yeah, accidentally check it in? We'll get to that in a second. Yeah, the replace keyword basically gives you the ability to take what would otherwise be seen as a remote dependency and say, actually, this is local, resolve this locally. You have the exclude keyword that allows you to basically blacklist versions of modules. You can see in this example, it said ZAP 117 is blacklisted, and then in the first require block, hang on a second. Excuse me, that should say ZAP 117 or 118. That package should be excluded, and the one at the top would be something else, 116 or 118. And then retract. I don't know if anybody's had to use retract. Imagine telling yourself, I won't ask for a show of hands, but if you publish a version of your module that has, say, a massive security hole, and you can't really move that tag because you're not really supposed to move tags, what you would do is you publish a new version with a newer version of the mod file that has a retract with that tag in it, and it lets people know, hey, don't use that broken version I accidentally published. Everybody knows the module stuff. You might run go get to go and, well, if your Go build, for example, spits out this error, this first error at the top here, which I'm sure a lot of people have seen as well, basically told what you need to run, which is really nice, really friendly. Run go get to go and get it. Go get -u with the // to update everything recursively in all the packages. And you can see an example of the output here. Zap, it grabbed 122, and then the second line tells you, yeah, I upgraded that. Go mod tidy takes all the stuff out of your go.sum file, tidies it up. You might be told to do that if you've allowed it to get a little bit too messy in there as well. Quick summary of the go sum file. I'm sure everybody's kind of taken a little look at these and has probably gotten a bit of an idea of what's in there. The first part is the path to a dependency. The second part is the version duplicated with a path to the module, the Go mod file. And then the checksum that is checked against a remote version of that checksum, so you can tell that you got the version of this module that matches up to what you would expect. Some stuff in here that I hope there might be a little bit in here that people don't know about the usage of proxies and a hash database and the indexes. So the default proxy nowadays is proxy.golang.org. And actually, it gives like a little speed up. It's quite nice. It has its own protocol. You're not talking Git over HTTP for it. It's built to be fast for this purpose, so it is fast for this purpose. The hash database, obviously, if you want to check that your version of a package you've pulled down, you'll do a checksum, and you want somebody else's checksum to verify. You don't check it against your own checksum. Doesn't make any sense, right? So there's a checksum database, and that's by default at sum.golang.org. And finally, there's an index available of all the published modules. You can go and grab that. It takes a little while. Sometimes it can be a couple of minutes out of date, but you can go and see a list of all the published modules. A little bit of drama on this. There was a little period when this first came in, especially on the, like you go check like mailing lists, go nuts and stuff like that. There are a few people who are a little bit upset that this has been made the default because, yeah, there's like some privacy concerns. I don't want to proxy everything through like Google's proxy. They're going to keep tabs on me and all this kind of stuff. You might also run into this problem if you've been having to refer to your own private repositories. So I think this first example, again, is probably the most likely for people to have touched. Setting Go private, you can give the first piece of the URL for your package. And effectively, the proxy and the sum database will be ignored for those packages. You can set it off for everything. Make an informed decision. I'm not saying to do that, but you can. You set Go proxy to direct, and you can set Go sum DB to off, and that behavior goes away. It goes back to the old style of working without proxies. And you can use alternatives. Go proxy and Go sum.io are a pair that are put up by the same organization, and you can go and read their privacy policy. They feel a bit more open. Up to you. Right? And then we have vendoring. I mentioned earlier. Yeah, I'm not going to let you screw up my dependency. I'm just going to copy them all into the project. That npm unpublished problem isn't a thing anymore. I've already got the package. What do I care? There's a quote that sometimes floats around in the Go ecosystem. Little copying is better than a little dependency, and that can apply here as well. Like we've got a small dependency. I'll just copy it in rather than maintain that link to that dependency forever. Those Rustcox articles talks about this at length, but also the negatives of this. You inherit a whole bunch of issues with having to maintain that code. You might find that your vendored version, you want to make little changes to it, and you don't upstream it. You've got to figure out what you're going to do to maintain that. And yeah, since Go 1.14, if you've ever used vendoring, you'll see that in your vendor folder, there is a modules.txt, and if it's present, Go just does the right thing and uses those vendored versions of the dependencies. Used to be a flag. You don't need that anymore. So here's an example of a super simple mod file. And if you run go mod vendor, it will copy all that stuff into the vendor folder, and your folder structure will look like this. You can see there's a modules.txt at the bottom there. Ghost view's been pulled in because it was the only dependency here at the bottom. And then almost all the way up to the modern day, we have Workspaces. Came in 1.18 earlier this year. Show of hands, anybody using Workspaces? Almost nobody. Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, I'm glad to be able to tell you about Workspaces. Great article on this, get familiar with Workspaces, but basically, what a confusing name. Workspaces were already a thing. So I'm going to say go work Workspaces when I'm referring to these. Unlike the old version that required you to have a very specific folder structure, what a Go workspace is, it's designed to allow you to group together collections of modules. It's very, very similar to that replace keyword, except you're not modifying a file that's checked into version control, so you're not accidentally checking your changes into version control or anything like that. Yeah, basically, the main thing about it is that it's for you locally. You're not going to share this with anybody else. It's your workspace. You can plug them all together. I can give an example of how it's used. Go work init will set you up with a go.work file. In this case, you can give optionally a list of folders. And if you do, you end up with a go work file like this. I've given 2 arguments here, the folder foo and the folder bar. You can see a list of use here. And if you then go and try and refer to any of the modules, either of those 2 modules, they will resolve locally. Go will go and it will look up a couple of levels on the folder structure and see that you're in a workspace, and it will just resolve those locally for you. If you want to add more to it, go work use will add more. In this case, I've added bar. And now we've got 3 in there. Now they all resolve locally to each other, and when you're done, I don't need to refer to each other anymore. You just delete the file. Dead simple. Highly recommend. It's also my first contribution to the Go code base. So best practices in 2022. Yeah, use those Go modules. Can't stress that enough. Everybody says that. Anybody, I hope, would give you the same advice. You might want to consider using Go mod vendor if it fits your use case. You just want to narrow those down and not worry about them anymore. Yeah, do it. You might want to use Go work workspaces, especially if you are dealing with lots of small repos. You're not dealing with, say you're not using a mono repo, but you want to work like you are. You still have all the issues of having to individually use version control on each of those modules, those packages, but you can work a bit better, a bit more like the old, kind of the best stuff from the old workspaces. And finally, don't use those GOPATH style workspaces anymore. They're deprecated, and yeah, I think everybody will say the same thing. There's one thing that I think people, I don't know if anybody's noticed, something that I've missed out. The future, there is one kind of big plan on the horizon, vulnerability management. Most people, I think, would probably think of, say, like NPM audit. A lot of tools have brought this in. Again, it's in the kind of wake of this kind of 2016, this kind of drama. But the ability to basically have a database full of vulnerabilities with modules and be able to scan your list of dependencies and their dependencies and tell if you've got an issue in any of your dependencies. You can use it now. This is available to go and grab from the X repo. You can run it. It's really slow, as all of these tools seem to be. I actually don't fully understand why. I'd like to get a little bit involved in the development of this coming up towards the end of this year. Yeah, give it a razz. This will probably be, I hope that this will be the next kind of thing that people will hear about after Workspaces. Let's do a wrap up. I told you all this stuff. We went from the beginning to the end. The future is exciting. My company is human. Did I mention that we're hiring? If you come over to the booth, we'll mention that again. And yeah, thank you for attending my talk.